What's up, y'all? You're watching Union Minded. I'm your host, Eric, and today we're going to give you a Railroad Workers Strike 2022 update. There have been some moving pieces today, and I want to update you with an article from NPR that summarizes what happened today. Before we dive on into that, though, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell, drop some comments, and share these videos. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. The House has voted to avert a rail strike. Now the bill heads to the Senate. The House has passed a resolution 209 to 137 that would force unions to accept a tentative agreement reached earlier this year between railroad managers and their workers and make an imminent strike illegal. President Biden has been leading the effort to head off a strike that could upend transportation of goods and services, skyrocketing prices on everyday items, including gasoline. Now, let's not forget that corporate greed had already caused these prices to skyrocket without the strike. So let's not be naive and think that this isn't already going on. This is just word salad to make us really afraid of what could happen during a strike. Now, don't get me wrong, everyone will be affected, but it's because of the railroad owners, and they should be the ones who are giving sick days to these workers. This is a quality of life issue, and it's one that we should all be able to get behind. The House also voted on a resolution that would provide 7 days of paid sick leave to railroad workers. That measure passed 221 to 207. 207 Republicans voted against giving people days off from work paid if they're sick. Keep that in mind. The effort is meant to ease concerns from labor unions and some lawmakers, despite Biden's request not to alter the carefully negotiated underlying deal. However, the Senate will also vote on both measures separately, meaning it's possible the contract could be approved without the sick leave change. That's foreshadowing. That's what that's called. That's foreshadowing. I can tell you already what's going to happen. The tentative agreement is going to pass in the Senate and go to Biden's desk, and the sick leave is going to go to the Senate and die there. And it's by design. Don't think these conversations haven't happened behind closed doors where Nancy and Chuck are talking about how this is going to play out. This is just to appease the public because there has been public pressure ever since the union started to vote down the tentative agreement over the quality of life issues. These guys are harping on the 24% wage increase without mentioning that there have been staff cutbacks and more burden placed on those workers over the last 5 years, and also not mentioning that that wage increase does not keep up with the inflation of the amount that inflation has taken place. So that's also something to think about. But the reason that they put that 7 days in there is because of public pressure. Why? Because the public is on the side of the unions in a major way. 70% of the public agrees that unions, everybody should have the right to a union, and that unions are a good thing. After the House vote, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters that the administration does not believe the Senate has the 60 votes needed to pass the sick leave measure, and the White House is not advocating for the Senate to pass the sick leave measure. The White House does not advocate for the sick leave measure. In fact, they were the ones that were cool with allowing it to have no sick days. So again, let us not be fooled and naive and think that this is not exactly what the folks in power want to have happen. They're siding with big business against workers. The president, of course, supports paid sick leave. Not true if you're going to sit here and play this way with the rail workers, when it's one of the most crucial operations for our infrastructure is to have rail transport goods across this country. It's how things move across the U.S. So if it's that critical, maybe you should have some sick leave so that you can have an efficient railway system. The president, of course, supports paid sick leave, including rail workers, but he does not support any bill or amendment that will delay getting this bill to his desk by Saturday. And he has been very clear about that, Jean-Pierre said. Labor advocates have long criticized the agreement for not addressing leave policies and particularly not including paid sick days, major sticking points between workers and management in the years-long negotiations. This isn't a new problem. These railway companies have fired people and now have it down to one man operating one train. There's no wonder they can't afford to give away sick days, right? But whose fault is that? You're reaping in all this profit. Hire more workers, have a more reliable staff, and then people can get sick and feel okay about missing work and won't get fired for it. We're disappointed that Congress is being called to intervene here for a couple of reasons. The first one is it shouldn't take the president or Congress to intervene to begin with. The railroads should do the right thing, said Peter Kennedy, chief negotiator for BMWED, one of the unions who rejected the agreement over the lack of sick leave, adding that the union is prepared to strike. We continue to ask that Congress do the right thing here, which is, if you're going to legislate a solution, they should legislate paid sick leave along with the tentative agreements, Kennedy said. But railroad managers are already warning Congress against making any changes to the agreement. They and Biden urged Congress to pass a bill implementing it as it was negotiated in the fall. Notice where the money's at, right? Money and Biden are advocating for the same outcome. The ramifications of approving such a measure would disincentivize future voluntary agreements for freight railroad, Amtrak, and airlines if a party in bargaining believes it can obtain a better deal from Congress than it could through good faith negotiations. Well, maybe you're not negotiating in good faith. And the Presidential Emergency Board process under the Railway Labor Act. Well, maybe that act needs to be updated. Maybe it's 100 years old for a reason. It needs to be changed. And said Association of American Railroads president. Oh, he represented the railroads. Of course, this is what you said. His name's Ian Jeffries. This ignores over 100 years of precedent and clearly usurps long-standing bargaining procedures. A rail strike is likely without congressional action, Biden warned Tuesday morning before meeting with bipartisan House and Senate leaders at the White House to talk about remaining legislative priorities. It's not an easy call, but I think we have to do it, he said before the meeting. The economy's at risk. Always when they sing about the economy, they're not talking about working people. They're talking about investment firms, Wall Street, big business. That's who they're talking about when they say the economy. Listen for the call outs. The call from the president comes weeks after the administration encouraged unions and management to come to an agreement on their own at the bargaining table without congressional interference. Strike threat in 2 weeks threatens the supply chain. The earliest workers could strike is December 9th, given that 4 of the 12 unions, including the largest, have rejected the tentative agreement brokered in September by the Biden administration, management, and union leaders. Union leaders who sold out their membership by not holding firm on the sick days that their membership wanted in the contract. Union representatives is the correct terminology. For us, the strike effectively starts this weekend, said Corey Rosenbusch, president of the Fertilizer Institute, on a call with reporters. Rail carriers have already notified that ammonia shipments will need to be pulled off of the network starting about 5 days before, which would be December 4th. So many of the fertilizer companies are already preparing for that reality. Railroads handle the transportation of 30 to 40% of all goods, but take on the lion's share of products like ethanol, fertilizer, and grains. Railroad managers warn that with a strike, there are few other options given ongoing trucking shortages and the risk of backlogging at ports. All of this comes back to these big companies not hiring enough personnel, not paying people enough money to come do the work, not providing adequate quality of life in that work and in the structure of their hiring. This is all a comeuppance for greed that's been going on for decades and centuries. I think the important piece to understand here when it comes to the contingency planning question is that there is zero elasticity right now in transportation. I wonder why. We are struggling with drivers, truck drivers, and then most recently, so much fertilizer also moves by waterways, Rosenbusch said. So the low water levels that we've been hearing about in the Mississippi River have already curtailed a lot of fertilizer movement by barge that had to shift to rail. Once again, the biggest sticking point is sick leave. It's not money, it's not greed, it's quality of life. The bare minimums that people need to have a decent life and not be just miserable 24/7 having to work through everything. But once you get a little wealthy, you get out of touch and you don't realize that people work hard. It's a myth that very wealthy folks work really hard. No, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. And if you're really wealthy and you're watching this and you're getting upset, there's a tissue for your issue. No, you don't. The biggest sticking point, sick leave, like I said. The contract negotiated by the administration includes provisions that would increase wages 24% over 5 years and cap healthcare premiums. But workers have argued that they want fairer treatment, especially in absence policies. They want paid sick leave, Kennedy said. The same people who worked their tails off through the pandemic, risking their health to make sure that Americans got their supplies, while many of them worked from home and via Zoom. So we're not asking for a lot here now. No, you're not asking for a lot. But railroad management has pushed back, arguing that sick leave is handled on a railroad by railroad basis, and each of the 12 separate union contracts includes its own form of paid sick benefits. They also point to the recommendations and tentative agreement crafted by the President Emergency Board, a group put together by Biden earlier this year to intervene in negotiations. That's a cop-out. That's a scapegoat. You're using the fact that there's 12 different unions and they each have different things and blah, blah, blah. You're using that as a scapegoat. They all work under the same railroad. They should all, if you're going to all be under the same tentative agreement, sick days should be involved in there, and everybody should have sick days. This is a bullshit argument. The PEB certainly evaluated both sides' proposals and made a recommendation, and in its recommendation explicitly rejected unions' request for additional traditional paid sick days because of the paradigms that currently exist. So you're saying they made a mistake. Understandably so. It should be corrected by Congress. But also said that it was adding to the recommended wage increases in lieu of addressing those requests by the unions. Jeffries of the Association of American Railroads said on a call with reporters, "Hey Jeffries, you guys, the profits that you guys made over all this time trumps the wage increase by quite a bit. And the amount that it would cost you to give 7 days paid off is a fraction of the profits you guys reaped in over the past 5 years. Y'all are just greedy, stingy robber barons, and that's it." Getting members on board. After the meeting between congressional leaders and the president on Tuesday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer told reporters he and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell had agreed to get a bill passed in the Senate ASAP, well before December 9th. Asked whether he had the votes, he said, "We're working on it." Once again, they're going to get a bill passed. It's going to be the original TA without the paid sick leave. Mark my words. I'm calling it beforehand. At least one Senate Republican said leaders should not count on his vote. In a tweet, Senator Marco Rubio wrote he won't vote for a deal that doesn't have the support of rail workers. Thank you, Senator Marco Rubio. I appreciate you coming out and saying that as a Republican, showing your support for workers. Now I hope that you stay true and vote no on the tentative agreement. Others, like Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont and John Hickenlooper of Colorado, have also said they would vote for a measure that taxed on paid sick leave to the agreement. Paid sick leave is the minimum. And I know that they're saying that, if they pass a tentative agreement and they force this onto the unions, that it'll be illegal to strike. Just because something's a law doesn't mean it's a just law. And I would totally support them striking anyway. And yeah, it would suck for all of us out here that are going to suffer due to the corporations' greeds who run the railroads. But I stand with the workers. And if they decide, screw that, I don't care what Congress said, we're going to strike, I support that. I was asked in my last video what we can do besides bang on the keyboard. Banging on the keyboard is important because what it is it raises awareness. And what that does is it creates that ripple where Congress is aware that the public is getting pissed off about this. They have people that watch trends. So when you do bang on your keyboard, believe it or not, that does help. But more importantly, what you can do is call your senator and urge them to vote no on the tentative agreement unless it has paid sick leave in it. That's another thing you can do. Call your senator. The House bill already passed. It's got 7 days paid sick leave. Call your senators. Beat on them. Make them hear your voice. And let's help these railroad workers get some paid days off, because this is some bullshit. That's what you can do. Anyway, my name's Eric. You're watching Union Minded. Don't forget, the fight is not left and right. It is up and down. It's going to take solidarity to win always. Each one teach one. Get out there and reach one. And there can be no union without you and I front and center. Peace.